Larry Bird has never been known for being speechless. The man who talked his way through 3 NBA championships, who famously told defenders exactly where he was going to shoot from before doing it anyway, and who once made Michael Jordan tell his teammates to stop talking, has always had something to say. But this time was different. Michael Jordan delivered a message so powerful, unexpected, and deeply respectful that it left the greatest trash talker in NBA history without a response. This wasn't about rivalry or the endless debate over greatness. It was one legend paying tribute to another, creating a moment the basketball world will never forget. Meanwhile, the French Open has welcomed countless celebrities over the years, from opera legends to global rock stars. But when Asia's songbird, Regine Velasquez, arrived at French Open, nobody anticipated what would happen next. Having performed for presidents, sold out Carnegie Hall, and earned recognition as the voice of a generation, the 56-year-old icon did something she had never done before. On a quiet afternoon in Paris, she stepped onto court Suzanne Lingling, took hold of a microphone, and sang a heartfelt song for a 21-year-old tennis player who had just suffered a first-round defeat. The emotional tribute stunned everyone in attendance. As the final notes echoed across the stadium, the crowd didn't simply applaud, they were moved to tears. The cameras captured every second of it. Alex Eala, the young star who had faced top-ranked opponents without fear and carried the hopes of millions of Filipino fans throughout her remarkable rise, stood completely frozen. Her hand rested against her heart as she struggled to process what was unfolding before her eyes. It was May 27, 2026, in Paris, France. 4:47 p.m. On court Suzanne Lingling, and in a moment that nobody inside the stadium could have predicted, everything changed. To understand the significance of what happened, you have to picture the scene. Alex Eala's French Open journey had already come to an end. Her first-round loss to Iva Jovic was still fresh in her mind, and the lingering questions of what might have been had not yet faded. The Philippine flags that had filled the stands only a day earlier were now folded away, packed into suitcases, and carried toward airport terminals. The dream of a deep tournament run had slowly disappeared into the Paris evening. Wanting a brief escape from the disappointment, Eala had returned to the grounds simply to watch tennis, to sit among the spectators and reconnect with the sport she loved, even on the days when it delivered heartbreak. Becoming the center of attention again was the last thing she expected. Court Suzanne Lingling was packed with fans gathered to watch an exciting second-round showdown between 2 rising stars. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as flags waved throughout the crowd and every point drew a roar from the stands. Eala sat quietly in the players' box with her mother by her side and her coaches a few rows behind. Dressed in a simple white hoodie, her hair tied back and her face free of makeup, she was doing everything possible to blend into the background. For the first time in days, she wanted nothing more than to be just another fan in the crowd. Then the music began. It wasn't the familiar sound of a stadium anthem or a pre-recorded tune echoing through the speakers. This was something different, something intimate, powerful, and impossible to ignore. A voice rose from the center of the court, clear and unmistakable, carrying across every corner of the stadium. The opening notes instantly captured everyone's attention. Fans stopped talking. Phones were lifted into the air. Even the match itself seemed to pause as players and spectators turned toward the source of the sound in confusion and amazement. Standing near the baseline with a microphone in her hand was Regine Velasquez. Asia's songbird had arrived at Roland Garros. The legendary performer, who had spent decades captivating audiences around the world, had sung for presidents, filled prestigious concert halls, and become one of the most celebrated voices of her generation. Millions had watched her perform during some of the most memorable moments in Filipino history. Yet despite all of her accomplishments, she had never done anything quite like this. She had never stepped onto a tennis court to honor a young athlete who had just experienced the disappointment of a first-round Grand Slam defeat. As her voice echoed through the stadium, a remarkable silence settled over the crowd. Thousands of spectators listened in complete stillness. The players stood frozen. Cameras quickly searched for Alex Eala, and when they found her, the emotion on her face told the entire story. Her hand flew to her mouth as tears gathered in her eyes. She appeared overwhelmed, struggling to comprehend what was happening. What had begun as an ordinary afternoon at Roland Garros had transformed into a deeply personal tribute, one dedicated to her perseverance, her courage, and the inspiration she had become to so many people. When the final note faded into the Paris air, the stadium erupted. Thunderous applause rolled through court Suzanne Lingling as fans rose to their feet. Yet the performance itself was only the beginning. Regine Velasquez lowered the microphone and turned her attention toward the player's box. With purpose in her step and emotion in her eyes, she began walking directly toward the young tennis star who had become a symbol of pride and hope for millions of Filipinos around the world. "Alex," she said, her voice gentle yet strong enough to carry through the silent stadium. "This is for you. Not because you won, but because you fought. Because you never gave up. Because you reminded all of us that losing a match does not make you a loser." Then she extended her hand toward the young tennis star. For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. The cameras captured every second as Regine Velasquez, the voice of a generation, stood on the famous red clay of Roland Garros, reaching out to a player whose tournament journey had ended far sooner than she had hoped. It was an image that ooled. "You lost a tennis match. That's not failure. Failure is giving up, and you've never done that. That's exactly why I came." For a moment, Regine's gaze drifted away as she reflected on her own journey. "I've been where you are," she continued. "Not on a tennis court, but in my career. I've released albums that didn't perform the way I hoped. I've had shows that weren't my best. I've listened to critics say my time was over. There were moments when I wanted to walk away from it all. But I didn't, because quitting would have been failure. Losing, struggling, making mistakes, that's just part of the journey." Alex listened carefully, absorbing every word. "How did you keep going?" she asked. Regine leaned back and smiled. "I remembered why I started. I remembered the love I had for what I do, the joy it gave me, and the people who believed in me when I couldn't always believe in myself. That's exactly what you need to remember. Think about the fans waving flags for you. Think about the people who follow every match, every victory, every setback. They're not supporting you simply because of results. They're supporting you because of your heart, your effort, and your willingness to keep fighting." Alex lowered her eyes for a moment before speaking again. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm scared, Tita Regine," she admitted. "I'm scared that I'll never win a Grand Slam. I'm scared that I'll always be remembered as the player who came close but never quite got there." The confession hung in the air between them. It was not the fear of losing a single match. It was the fear shared by every athlete who dares to dream big, the fear that their greatest goal might always remain just out of reach. And for the first time since arriving in Paris, Alex allowed herself to say it out loud. Regine listened carefully before offering an answer that Alex would never forget. "Maybe you'll win a Grand Slam one day, and maybe you won't," she said gently. "But that's not what matters most. What matters is that you keep showing up, that you keep fighting, that you continue inspiring the millions of people who see a part of themselves in your journey." She squeezed Alex's hand and smiled. "That's the Alex Eala effect. It's not about winning every match. It's about courage, perseverance, and refusing to quit. You're already a champion in that regard." Their breakfast stretched on for nearly 2 hours. They talked about music, tennis, family, dreams, and the shared experiences that come with representing the Philippines on an international stage. Regine shared stories from the early years of her career, the setbacks, the doubts, the disappointments, and the moments when she questioned whether she should continue. Alex listened intently, absorbing every lesson and every memory. What began as a simple breakfast gradually became a conversation about resilience, purpose, and the responsibility that comes with inspiring others. When it was finally time to leave, Regine reached into her bag and handed Alex a small box. "This is for you," she said. "Open it later." Alex nodded, overcome with emotion and unable to find the right words. That evening, back in her hotel room, she carefully opened the gift. Inside was a delicate gold necklace. Hanging from the chain was a small pendant shaped like the Philippines. It was elegant in its simplicity, but what caught her attention were the words engraved on the back in delicate script, "Laban, always. You are not alone." For several moments, Alex simply stared at the necklace. Then she placed it around her neck. In that instant, it became more than jewelry. It became a reminder of everything she had learned during those difficult days in Paris. A symbol of resilience, faith, and the countless people standing behind her. She would continue wearing it throughout the remainder of her stay in France and long after the tournament ended. It would accompany her through practices, matches, victories, and disappointments. Whenever doubt crept into her mind, She would touch the pendant and remember the message engraved on its back, that she was never carrying the burden alone. Meanwhile, the French Open moved forward. New stars emerged, new storylines unfolded, and eventually new champions would lift trophies on the famous red clay. Yet for many fans, one of the most memorable stories from that year's tournament would not involve a championship match or a trophy presentation. It would be the story of a young athlete finding strength after defeat and the unexpected act of kindness that reminded her why she began the journey in the first place. The tournament would move on. New champions would be crowned, new headlines would dominate the sports pages, and new stories would capture the world's attention. But long after the final trophy had been lifted, Alex Eala would carry something far more personal home with her: the gold necklace around her neck and the memory of the woman who had given it to her. On the morning of May 29, 2026, at 9:17 a.m., Alex arrived at Charles de Gaulle Airport preparing to leave Paris behind. Officially, she was departing without a single victory at the tournament. Yet emotionally, she was leaving with something far more valuable than a place in the draw. Around her neck hung the gold pendant shaped like the Philippines, and in her heart remained the words and song that had helped her rediscover her confidence. The airport bustled with activity. Travelers hurried toward departure gates, business professionals checked flight schedules, and tourists prepared for journeys home. Yet near the Philippine Airlines check-in area, a small crowd had gathered for a different reason. They were not reporters chasing headlines or celebrities seeking attention. They were ordinary Filipinos living and working abroad. Nurses, caregivers, engineers, students, and families who had come simply to say goodbye to someone who had inspired them. They held Philippine flags. They carried handmade signs. Some fought back tears as they watched her approach. "Alex, you made us proud. We'll be here when you come back. Laban always." The words followed her through the terminal. With her racket bag over one shoulder and her mother walking beside her, Alex greeted the supporters one by one. Every time the pendant brushed against her chest, she felt the engraved message re-stinned in her journey: H.